Okay. Now the question becomes, is how did a smart critter like me, over the many years, get around 1,500 years of crap? Now the internet's only been around for, let's say productively about 25 years, okay? Now, all the Buddhists have actually promulgated all these lies which have no basis whatsoever in doctrine. I say there's only about a handful, literally a handful of people that can actually translate ancient Prakrit. Now, all these monks and nuns that are living out of temples in Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Ceylon, where the saffron robes, they're actually Theravadins or Sarvastivadins. They're materialists, denotatively, because once you deny the soul, then you've got nothing left but materialism. Now, there's absolutely no passage within the doctrine of Buddhism. Now, like I said, I'm not a Buddhist. I'm a hardcore Neoplatonic Platonist, but I translate ancient Prakrit and I translate ancient Greek. I just told you about some of the great evils, intellectual evils, which is truth by consensus and peer review. Now, peer review, how I told you before, Encyclopedia Britannica article was written. If you actually open up any textbook on philosophy and you turn to the page on Buddhism, it will say, well, Buddhism denies the self or the soul, therefore there's the term anatta, or anatman, because this means no soul. There's not a single passage anywhere within doctrine that says that. I've got a digital search engine from the Chatta Sangyana Tipitaka, which is digitized. And imagine that, and I've been translating a Prakrit for a very, very long time. No such passage I know. All 662 occurrences of this term is in an adjective, is saying A, B, C, X, Y, Z, Nata, Rupa, Nata, Veda, Nata, Sankhara, Nata, Vijnana, Nata, forms, feelings, perceptions, so on. All these things which are phenomenal are not myself or not my soul. Now, the fallacy of composition is like saying, well, the vacuum cleaner is not an elephant, the camera's not an elephant, the table's not an elephant, the light's not an elephant, therefore elephants don't exist. And of course, this fallacy of composition is the illogical premises upon which all of Buddhism lies, is a via negativa apophatic methodology of coming to self-assimilation or subjective assimilation by the realization of all that which you are not. Now, the only thing that's actually called permanent, most dear pia, as eternal, nicham, as the only refuge, is the soul. Why do they ignore these passages? Very good question. Like Attasarana Nandasaran, the soul is refuge, none other's refuge. Dignakia 2.100, Attakamiso Saranam Gatika. The soul is the refuge that I've gone to, Jarakapali 1441. Soul as a refuge, Saranam Matana, Dignakia 2.121, or Jaraka 2.1341, Tata Ahavasrati. The soul is charioteer. It's an ancient Egyptian and Indian metaphor that the 5 horses are the senses and feelings, and the reins are your control, and the chariot is the body, and the charioteer is the soul, not the consciousness, not the mind, but the actual soul. As is the case with all forms of ancient metaphysics and monism, it is the case, Plato said this, all of Indian metaphysics say this, the ancient Egyptians said that there's 2 selves, okay? There's the empirical self, the psychophysical self, flesh, blood, piss, and urine. Obviously, that's not the self. Referring to a radio, it's like saying, well, the tubes aren't the signal, the box isn't the signal. If you open up the radio, you're not going to find a signal, therefore there's no signal. It's like you look inside the human body, the body has no soul. Has implies possession, okay? Nobody has a soul. What do you mean nobody has a soul? You're not saying there is a soul. Has implying possession, okay? The object is not a possessor of the subject, okay? There are 2 selves. There's the persona non grata within all forms of ancient monistic metaphysics, i.e. Bob, Sue, Larry. The person over there is made out of flesh and blood, piss and urine. There's a walking water bag of piss and blood, okay? It's headed to the grave, right? Yeah, we all know that. All forms of metaphysics refer to 2 selves, okay? The dear self and the foul self. I mean, that's even found within the Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Samyutta and Gotara Kodaka Nikaya of 2,500-year-old Prakrit, which I translate. But all of Buddhism actually holds really tight to the definition of this one term, because without it, then Buddhism is nothing other than a Neo-Vedantic movement. And that's exactly what it is. And to think opposite reminds me of some Christians that would be, their idea of Christianity is that, Jesus hated Jews or something. I mean, Christianity was nothing other than an outbranching. I'm not going to talk about Christianity. That Christianity is like some sort of anti-Jewish religion. That's how actually modern Buddhism operates. Modern Buddhism operates, and this is a hardcore fact, okay? Because without it, it just becomes another branch of Indian metaphysics. No different, and that's all that it was. There's not a single term or concept with the ancient Pali Nikayas that is original. None. Even the term Buddhism doesn't even exist. The only time that that the teacher taught what it was Samyutta Nikaya 5.4. He called it Brahmayana, path to the absolute, or the path to Brahman. So that's as absurd as saying that Jesus hated the Jews or something. I mean, you know, Christianity was an anti-Jew religion. That's exactly what modern Buddhists actually believe, is that Buddhism was anti-Hindu. Of course, Hinduism is not a religion. It refers to a peoples. There's no such thing, okay, you can ask Indian, as a religion called Hinduism. Hinduism refers to a people of the Indus River Valley. Does not refer to any religion. Well, that person's a Hindu. Well, that would be kind of correct because you're referring to a peoples, but you're not referring to a religion. It's like saying, talking about someone, it's like, well, that person's a Jew. Well, it's like, well, yeah, they are an ethnic Jew, but that doesn't mean that they practice Judaism. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I've met more than a few Jews that were atheists, or, you know, they're whatever religion. It's like, well, he's a Jew. It's like, yeah, he's a Jewish person ethnically, but that doesn't mean he practices a Jewish religion. It's the same thing when you call an Indian a Hindu. Hinduism does not refer to religion. It refers to a people. So, American Buddhists are really the worst. Europeans, now all this form. Now, I can point you to 1,000 books, which you probably don't even care about, but the people that exported this notion to all the Europeans and all the Americans, by the way, were early. Remember, you know, how England kind of had its thumb on India and, you know, was occupying the piss out of India for all those years? A lot of the ideas spread from India back to Europe and back to England vis-a-vis English occupation. But where they got it from was from the Yellow Robe people in Ceylon, and they're in other places in India. And since they couldn't translate Prakrit, they came back with the notion that Buddhism was this form of spiritual materialism, and that's how it exists today. Now, there were a few people like C.A.F. Rhys-Davids who founded the Polytext Society and learned. She translated more Polytext than anybody else, and she, amongst others. Now, her work's been buried. You want to talk about stuff that was buried? She just spent decades translating all these enormous texts, proving that earliest Buddhism said that the soul was most dear, and it is. You know, I translate Pali, and her stuff has been buried. Even though she's in the Polytext Society, people have tried to forget her. She came back and said, all this stuff we thought before Buddhism was is absolute crap. The original texts say something so different. Now, here's how I got around 1,500 years of crap, because there are Buddhists that actually have paid for. You can actually do this. You can actually pay for Wikipedia God membership on Wikipedia, so you can't let anybody alter anything. So if you want to keep the definition of something, and I've been doing it for years, they'll always revert it back to the way they want it. They're definition demons. They're definition Nazis. So the way I got around it was that I wrote all these articles on the definition of anatta, and I bombed, figuratively, the entire world, every ass crack of every corner of the world. And even though they would remove it, I would reassign a new name, or I would just keep bombing every corner of the world. Wherever this word popped up, I would just bomb it with the accurate information. Everything I said had a citation. Boom, boom, boom. I'd even give not only the citation, the translation, the original Romanized text, which people can't translate Pali anyway. And I made an airtight argument that there is nobody on this earth that can be, like I said, on the definition of this one word, I am God. And I know that sounds really arrogant, but let me tell you what, it's the truth. Really is the truth. So I bombed the entire world on the definition of this one word, and there is a fact that enough quantity eventually affects quality. So then people started looking at these articles that I wrote, and they go, oh my God, you know, everything this guy says is logical, and everything he says has got a citation, and it makes such sense, and all these other people just quoting their own opinions, and this guy's got a citation for everything. Everything he says is true. I mean, there isn't a single thing he doesn't say that isn't logical with a citation, a reference. And so, within a period of, let's say, about 10, 12 years of doing this hardcore, which I kind of stopped doing it years ago, I was able to turn about 35 or 40% of the world. I had all these people contact me, and they still contact me. And it's endless, and I'll point them to sources and whatnot and say, you know, I just don't have time to talk to them forever on the phone. I just don't. I'll point them to all these sources and whatnot. It's like, you know, go study this. I've written the articles. You know, you either comprehend it or you don't. So I took this gigantic religion, which has its entire basis off the definition of this one word, by the way, and I turned it around. Not half of it, but almost half of it. Now, if you type in Anada, you'll still see like Encyclopedia Britannica or Wikipedia, but you'll have, of course, these definition Nazis that really got really tight grips on the definition of this one word. They'll never let it go. In the face of logic and hundreds of citations, they will never let it go because they're closed-minded. They're not truth seekers. They're nihilists. They will, of course, all religions are like this. I mean, it's secularized metaphysics. That's what religion is by definition. It is secularized. Now, I don't mean metaphysics in the terms, you go to metaphysics in the book section and you run into all this New Age cult crap and, you know, rub the crystal this and nonsense crap that. That's a current connotation of metaphysics. The original term of denotation of metaphysics dates back to Plato and Aristotle, Plotinus, Proclus. I mean, real hardcore people that were into logic and you know, truth and sense. I mean, even people like Benjamin Franklin studied Plotinus and Greek. All the founders of the United States were really hard into researching Aristotle. Back in the day, unless you were studying Plato and Aristotle, you had a crap education. Now, it doesn't matter how good an education you got, you're not studying that stuff. Or if you are, you're taking a philosophy class. It's like, oh, read this passage. You're not discussing what it actually means. Back in the old, it's like, how did all this incredible literature of these true geniuses and giants stop like in the 16th century? You know why it stopped in the 16th century? That's when hardcore study of Plato and Aristotle and Plotinus and Proclus stopped. All these people that form the basis of scientific thought and logic, they just stopped studying them. But anyway, as far as this definition is concerned, and I know this is going to bore the piss out of some of you people, but you know, it is amazing the nature of human stupidity. I mean, these people are definition Nazis. My hardcore premise, and I've always lived by this, and there's nothing more true, is that there's no such thing as truth by consensus. And what is absolutely true is that nothing popular is true, and nothing true is popular. Absolutely the case. And the very notion of peer-reviewed. Well, was that peer-reviewed? I mean, did you ever, if you really knew what the definition of peer-reviewed was, you would never use such a vile term. Peer-reviewed is just someone that's trying to get up into academia, and how they do it is they kiss the asses of the people above them by citing their... It's just one asshole kissing the asshole of another asshole. You just got an endless chain of lip to asshole, lip to asshole, lip to ass. There's no such thing as intellectual progress that's achieved that way. And I spent 6 years in college. I know how this game works. You can't write something new or contradictory to the people above you. It's like, well, all these guys that are my professors and I'm trying to get tenure here, I'm going to write an article that completely refutes their... I mean, it's just... You write something that agrees with the people before you, and those people wrote something that agrees with the people before them. There's nothing new under the sun, but all these people, their modus operandi is to just have a huge circle jerk of one asshole agreeing with another asshole. And intellectual progress can never occur that way, and this is what peer-reviewed actually means. Every time I hear those words peer-reviewed, it makes me pucker right in my backside, because it's just one of the most evil terms that there is. I mean, this sort of intellectual stupidity that just reeks right from the pits of hell. But anyway, remember, there's no such thing as Hinduism, and I kind of hope I gave you some insight into some of the mechanics of pseudo-intellectualism that operates out there that I've actually had to fight, and how I found a way right around all of it. All I had to do is be incredibly smart, cite all my sources, and completely bombard the internet for 10 years. And I met my goal. I got it. Thanks for watching. Hope I didn't bore you too much. That's a dry topic for most people.